All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our monthly Real Talk.
Hello.
Our monthly mental health ministry conversation. Everybody that's watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, if you could do me a favor and go ahead and share the post. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, if you could do me a favor and go ahead and share the post, I would be extremely appreciative, excited about our conversation tonight and our special guest, Dr. Adosha. But now I want to place it in the hands of our mental health ministry co-coordinator, Roxalina Rawls.
Thank you, Pastor. Is Dr. Dosha signed on?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Yes, I'm
wonderful,
here. Hey.
wonderful.
Hello, good evening.
First, giving honor to God and his authority. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Roxalina Rawls, and I am a co-coordinator for our mental health ministries here at Greater Bethel AME Church. Thank you, Pastor Rawls, for this opportunity to share information that may help us all regarding our physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. I am absolutely delighted to have Dr. Innocent Adosha as our guest presenter. Our focus this evening is on living with intention of developing and maintaining a healthy lifestyle will improve your mental health. Before I begin, I would like to share some interesting facts about Dr. Adosha. Dr. Innocent Adosha is a board-certified family physician and the founder of Primary Care Institute, which is located in Gainesville, Florida. The Primary Care Institute was established in 2003. Dr. Adosha earned his medical degree from Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio, and completed his family medicine residency at the University of Florida here in Gainesville. Dr. Adosha's medical interests include community health, preventative health, international health, overseas medical missions, anti-aging and longevity medicine, aerospace medicine, and population health with a passion for minority health and education. He is a husband to Alex and a father to Sophia, Gabe, and James. His hobbies include nature photography, philosophy, and he is an avid ping pong player. So without any further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Innocent Adosha. Good evening, Dr. Adosha.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for that warm introduction. Everybody, thanks for joining on board, and really thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I know I've done this before in the past, but as you all know, folks who know me, that this is my passion, is to try to educate folks on what we can do. There you go. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Just to educate folks, have a open dialogue on how we can all stay healthy. Health to me equates more than just the physical aspect of healthcare, but it also includes the whole body. I mean, our bodies are connected. The brain, mental health, all that is a connection on how really what the outcome of our wellness and our health really amounts to. I do have some slides. First, I mean, let me ask. I don't want to talk about what I want to talk about. I really always want to look at the audience and figure out if there's anything in particular that anyone in the audience would like me to spend time talking about, than really talking about what I want to talk about.
I think we'll trust you as we start.
All right. Okay. All right. Fantastic. So how about this? I do have some slides, not a whole lot, just a few slides that I wanted to present. Sometimes visual aspect makes talks a little bit more easier. So let me just kind of get my slides here. Share screen, where is this? All right. All right, so here's some slides that I made. Nothing really fantastic. The key is this. The one thing that I want to kind of put forth out there, mental health is really a complex issue. It doesn't just involve what happens to us internally, but also affects what happens towards externally. Also has a big factor on what happens to our mental health. But the most important thing really, the mental health, what we put into our bodies, has a significant impact on what really happens to us mentally. As we all know, we've heard about the increased risk of dementia that we're seeing in the country. And when we go back and do, multiple research have really shown that the big factor that leads to cognitive impairment, it's really related to what the individual has eaten, what kind of foods they've had through their lifespan. And the most important foods, I always say, the most important foods that helps us maintain our mental status and also maintain, in general, our mental health are really foods that are natural foods. Avoid processed foods. I know probably everyone has heard about this. Ultra processed foods are dangerous. Those are things that we know that are leading to a lot of the medical problems that we see, diabetes, high blood pressure, peripheral arterial disease, which of course leads to things like leg amputation, etc., renal failure. For a lot of times, this thing's really the big primer, really about what the individual has been eating. And processed foods are the key. Processed foods, nobody knows what those are, really, or foods are not natural. Things that are processed in the factory, those things have been found to be the really major indicator of poor mental status and poor health in general. The one thing as well is therapeutic lifestyle change, which includes the diet and also physical activity. The most recent evidence now shows that to improve and reduce your risk of dementia, just basic walking, getting out, walk, is the biggest predictor to reduce your risk of Alzheimer's disease. And I've got this little slide here on the things that we know that are really beneficial to improve mental health. Reduce stress. Sometimes that's, of course, difficult because these are external things that happens to us that leads to stressors. But always, if you have good support, good family support, good ministry, good religious people that you can talk to, you trust, all those things are a factor that helps us reduce the external stress that clouds and causes us to be ill. So here's the deal. Stressors causes our bodies to release hormones that really causes our blood vessels to age. And as everybody knows, the blood vessels in the body are the most important conduit that, of course, their job is to distribute oxygen, blood flow. And when those blood vessels are compromised, it leads to all sorts of medical problems. So sleep is always an important issue. But of course, a lot of times when we have poor sleep can also be related to what we're eating. If you're eating foods that are heavy, processed foods, fried foods, those by itself can lead to esophageal reflux disease that can ultimately affect how we sleep. And if we don't sleep well, the person isn't going to do well the next day. And all that compounds how the person ends up feeling, etc. The one issue that we're seeing, of course, in how things are is that us as African Americans, we have a much lesser reason for a lot of us to go and seek professional help when we have mental status issues. So I do have a little bit of a slide here on the population, and also that we really need to have more access to mental health. For example, I can say on the east side of Gainesville, where my practice is located, we barely have any mental health providers in our part of town, and that's a big issue. If you don't have the support, then it makes it difficult for the person to really get access to mental health providers. But the one good thing is this: in this day and age, with COVID, there were a lot of things medically that we weren't doing before, and one of those, of course, is telehealth. Recently, there's been an explosion of telehealth mental health providers, but of course, you have to have the technology to be able to access those providers and be able to have them offer you the help that we need. And here's the thing too: even as we extrapolate and go further, issues of suicide, we're seeing that Black males, unfortunately, now have one of the highest risk of suicide than really most other racial groups. Things have always been different before, where we saw suicide was a much higher risk in white males, but the statistics are changing. And that's something that we really, as a community, need to look into and figure out what can be done for us to reduce the risk and also reduce the disparities that lead to these things. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot more to say, so I'm just going to open up the floor for everybody to have questions for me.
Dr. Dosha, I have a couple of questions. My first question is, you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation about dementia. Could you clarify some things for me? First of all, is that hereditary? If there's a family history of dementia, is that something that you will order just get, or is dementia individual type of challenge for someone? I'm not sure.
So,
Could you speak a little bit about dementia?
sure, absolutely. So, that it's a great question. So there are multiple types of dementia. All right. So I know that most of us hear about Alzheimer's dementia, but there are multiple different types of dementia. So let's start with Alzheimer's dementia is one particular type of dementia where people make something called amyloid proteins. They're proteins that build up in the brain and affects the way the brain functions, right? That kind of dementia could be genetic, but most dementias people have in America, all right, is due to what's called vascular dementia. And this kind of dementia comes from cardiovascular disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, right? So anything that really affects the blood vessels that feed the brain, right? So when the brain is starved of oxygen, if this happens in certain parts of the brain that controls memory,
Mhm.
that type of brain the function will be diminished and decreased. So most people that have dementia, it's not really from Alzheimer's dementia. And Alzheimer is one particular type of dementia. And what that is when you build up this thing called amyloid plaques that build up in the brain. So, and then the other part of dementia too, for a lot of people, is also dementia based on substance use. A lot of people, alcohol leads to dementia. Excessive alcohol use affects the brain and leads to dementia. And of course, this whole process of as well, processed foods also deprives the brain of the nutrients the brain needs to grow and nourish. And then there are also some genetic disorders like Parkinson's disease also can cause dementia ultimately. But most people with dementia, it's due to vascular disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, lifestyle issues, alcohol abuse, poor nutrition.
Okay.
So the
How
whole,
early?
I'm sorry.
Okay. I wanted to know how early can dementia start? Can it vary from person? Where do you see it starting? What range, or is there range?
Well, the absolutely dementia can start at any age. It depends on what's the leading factor of it, right? What leads to the dementia is what determines how early it starts. I mean, I've had patients who have early dementia, who start dementia in their 40s.
Mm.
But most people get dementia later on in life, all right? The folks who have it at early age, just like anything, they're just like cancer, people get it early. That group of people are a small segment of people. And a lot of times there's really nothing we can do about those people. It's unfortunate, but some people is just based on genetic and these things happen early. But the majority of folks who have dementia have it later on in life, 60s, 50s, 70s. But lifestyle has also been shown again to
Mm.
be the leading factor of dementia. Lifestyle.
Okay. Okay. And you had mentioned walking. That type of exercise helps to reduce dementia.
Absolutely, yes. All studies, the recent studies have shown, aside of telling people read books, do puzzles, X, Y, and Z, those actually also help. But the number one thing that everyone needs to be doing to really reduce their risk of dementia is walking. I mean, I feel that walking is free. If you can walk, of course, there are folks who can't. But walking, getting out and doing things, your senses, as you're out walking, you use a whole lot of your senses. You're using your brain to know where your legs are. There are a lot of things in the environment you see, birds, animal, so many things out there that keeps your brain engaged. And so those are the things that we know that makes a big difference as well.
Dr. Dosha, so when I think about dementia, and you can correct me whether I'm right or wrong, I don't think of it as something that can be, I guess, corrected. That I think, I guess, then. So can you help me out on that right there? Is it something that can be corrected, or do you just kind of try to slow it down,
Well, it is something that can be prevented.
prevent it? Okay.
Yes. I mean, it's like somebody who has a spinal cord injury, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you're paralyzed, right? Yeah. Once you're paralyzed, we don't have a way yet to recover brain tissue.
Okay.
But dementia can be prevented.
Mhm.
Once you get it, unfortunately, once dementia comes in, either you stop the process by saying, okay, what is the cause of the dementia? Is this due to dementia from lifestyle changes? If somebody's an alcohol abuser, you get rid of the alcohol, right? And hopefully that will slow down the progression. But once you damage nervous tissue, we do not have the science to regenerate neurons yet. There's research going on about that, but unfortunately, we don't have that. So once you damage your brain or damage your nerves, we do not have the science and the medicine yet to fix those issues. All we can do is maybe slow the progression down. But that's just where we are in medicine. So the key to dementia is prevention. And the way to prevent dementia for us, doesn't matter how old you are, it's really about what we're eating. It's just about eating the foods that God put on earth for us to eat, not something some factory, some corporation is making to feed us. Those foods, all they really care about are profits. I mean, that's it. I mean, honestly, that's all it's about. It's about what can we produce to sell it as fast, as quickly, and as much of it as possible. Right. So, and that's the thing. Unfortunately, there's a lot of forces out there, the media, TV, ads that push for people to eat these things. But we just have to go back to how we're made as human beings and eat the
So
natural foods that are here.
so tell me this right here then. So I think I have a pretty clear understanding of what you're saying when you say processed food. Um, Tell me this. I hear a lot of people lately that mention even with foods that we would think are grown naturally. I hear people talk about things like seeded watermelons and non-seeded watermelons. Um, when science begins to play with the natural way a thing is that
Mhm.
also that's considered process?
No, and that's
Okay.
not processing. Now, granted, all the GMOs, which are the genetically modified foods that we have out there, right? We honestly don't know. I mean, honestly, as a
Mhm.
physician, we don't know. Granted, industry may tell us differently that yeah, these foods are safe, etc. Maybe they are, but processed foods are foods that are taken away from the way they are in nature and made into a certain form. Even natural foods. So when you get foods that are made naturally and you process them so you can ship them, you can package them and ship them off to somewhere else to be sold, and it sits on the shelf for months and months and months. One thing is lunch meat. All right. All lunch meat, bologna, sausage, bacon, hot dogs. All right. Those are all processed foods. Those foods have also been shown to be a big indicator or cause of cognitive impairment, which of course is dementia, heart attack, stroke. So, stroke is also one thing that leads to dementia, right? When you get a blockage in the brain, that's what a stroke is. And people have those strokes in the deep matter of the brain, the white matter. And those are the things that also lead to dementia. So, this micro strokes that people have, processed foods are dangerous. Studies have shown it, multiple studies. They lead to cancer, they lead to stroke, they lead to heart attack, they lead to disability, and they lead to early death.
So
Every one of them.
have you seen some models, successful models? So like in our community, many times when we talk about healthy eating, I think it's getting better now. It's a better conversation now. But it's a lot of times it's a conversation that's kind of laughed off and going back to what we've always done. Um, but I think dementia is something that really strikes fear because we have so many family members that experience different forms of dementia. So I think it hits
Oh,
hard and
sorry.
really gets our attention. Yeah. And so I think it hits hard and really gets our attention. Have you seen any successful models where organizations or churches or people like that are able to successfully, um, I guess, present ideas and methods and things that are consistent and ongoing efforts to reduce the things that causes dementia, like the processed food? Have you seen any groups out there that's been successful at presenting that to their group, to their congregations or organizations?
Well, I haven't, but here's the deal. The last time we that I spoke with you guys, I had mentioned the key to this is really early education. Early education is a key, right? If we can raise our kids from, I know it's difficult. There's a lot of outside forces pushing us for them to eat differently. But if we can start early and pushing for our children to learn, to relearn what they should be eating and how they should be eating, I think that would be a big way to really start to, nip a little bit at this issue of processed food. Again, there are so many outside forces who have a lot much resource and money that push these things up. One thing, for example, right? There's this drink called Prime that my two sons all of a sudden went to the Publix. Oh, buy Prime, and I didn't know anything about it. All of a sudden, Prime is being sued by the government for selling this drink they say is healthy, that has caffeine that's almost 3 times what an adult should have a day, right? So again, there's so many forces out there. But the key for us is really, childhood education, because what you learn as a child is what carries on as you get older. And if we can be successful in doing that, then as the kids get older, hopefully they will maintain what we've taught them, just like anything else, all right? Just like anything else that we do in life. When we teach kids early, that makes a difference on what happens to them as they get older. So, uh, and that would be the model that I would really always encourage. So as we serve Sunday, Sunday church, we're serving foods to kids. We modify it so they know this is not, whatever else is not the way that they should be eating. So
While you're on the
that's what I would
subject
say.
of, okay, while you're on the subject of food, what about plant-based foods? What's your feedback on that in
Oh,
terms of
well,
plant-based foods?
yeah. Thanks for asking that. I know, of course, plant-based foods are always the best option for everyone, right? In so many ways. Plant-based, you can't go wrong with that. Animal product by itself, and not even the way the foods are grown, but animal products have a lot of fat in it, and fat by itself as well is part of what leads to atherosclerosis, is what leads to blockage of blood vessels in the body that leads to stroke, leads to heart attack, and really also leads to white matter disease, which ultimately causes deprivation of blood flow to parts of the brain that the body needs for memory. Yes, plant-based foods, all right. Plants have more antioxidants in them, and antioxidants is really the things that we need to heal our bodies every day, right? And most plant-based foods, most farmers that grow plants grow their plants better than how we raise animals, cows, etc., chickens. They're raised in places where, I mean, the environment, it's not healthy at all. They're more prone to disease, they're more steroids, massive antibiotics. All that makes a big difference. Plant-based food.
Well, when you
Excellent
speak
question.
of that,
Plant-based foods.
Okay. I have a family member that within the last, I would say, 6 months, switched to plant-based foods,
Uh-huh.
and the blood pressure has decreased tremendously, has decreased tremendously. And this particular individual was eating other non-plant-based foods for most of his life. And with this change in his lifestyle, he has seen some results in a very short period of time.
Absolutely. So as you guys know, there's this medicine called Ozempic and Wegovy that are there, right? For people who are, there's a big thing. The same thing those medicines do, you can accomplish them by eating more fiber. And studies have also shown here too, most religious groups, and one example in America is the Seventh-day Adventists. They have the longest lifespan of any religious group in America. And the reason for that is that their preachings are all really about plant-based foods, right? Their plant-based foods is part of the core of what Seventh-day Adventist denomination preaches. So most people they don't engage in alcohol as much. They don't engage in and they have the longest in California. There's Loma Linda. All right, Loma Linda is part of the blue zone in America. I don't know if you ever heard about blue zones. Blue zones are cities in the world where people live the longest. And when we look at these cities, the big factor is that they don't eat as much, animal foods. They eat mostly plant-based foods, and we have that in America, in Loma Linda, California, which is the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They're one of the longest living people in America. They live to be hundreds and healthy, less dementia, less heart attack. So hence, the Adventist healthcare is exploding all over the country because their philosophy, it's about therapeutic lifestyle change, not about medications, not about all that. Therapeutic lifestyle change, plant-based foods.
So I have another question.
Yes,
so
please.
People that have a certain lifestyle in the way that they eat, or maybe no exercise or activity, when can you start? Is it ever too late to change?
Well, there's never anything too late. I mean, anything at any time is always beneficial, always beneficial. There's never really too late. I mean, there's been studies shown where you have somebody who's had a heart attack seen on a cardiac cath, and the person would change their lifestyle, change to plant-based foods, cut out processed meat or processed food in general, and they come back and recheck the person's blood vessels a year or two later, and the plaques and atherosclerosis have gone away, right? Has totally disappeared. So there's never too late. Even folks who've had a heart attack, stroke, there's never really too late. The damage could have been done, but if you want to slow it down and avoid it from getting worse, you've got to make changes. And you have to change the things that you're eating. That's a big factor. Anyone has any other questions for me?
Pastor, is there anything in the chat?
Not right now.
Okay.
Not right now. Yeah, I'm just kind of interested in the I'm the information, I have the information is, the information is facts. My biggest concern is, what's the best and most effective way to get people that are disproportionately being affected by these facts. The best tactic or the most effective way to provoke the change that's necessary. I, I'm, and so that's really where my mind is not being convinced that, hey, this is a problem and this causes the problem, but how to get behaviors changed so that the problem doesn't continue to exist. And I'm not sure. I would put that pressure on Dr. Adosha to come up with those answers. But that's really where my head is right now, is that I'm
Yeah.
convinced that those are the facts. But now what are we're starting a community garden in the back of our church. We had the people, they started a few weeks ago, and today they came today to look at the build out design, and it's something that we're going to try to teach to our community. But in my
Cool.
mind, it's like, okay, I'm convinced that it's there, but what's the most effective way to get the most amount of people to change behavior?
Well, that's always a difficult issue to deal with. I wish I had the behavioral um, model to help us solve the problem. But the main issue is always education. We just got to keep spreading the message. What I do for my patients when people come to see me is really about trying to, is education, patient education. Because a lot of people don't know. A lot of folks, we think that no, even though we all have eat certain things all our lives, and I know there's an issue about cost, right? But ultimately, when we really look at the cost of eating bad food and the cost of eating, quote, healthier foods, the price difference is really not that much of an issue. And then when you look at what the bad foods that are supposedly cheaper would cause to the person in the future, right? So that's always an issue, but it's always a key. And again, the problem is this: there's so many outside no, outside voices and outside noises that have a lot more influence, a lot more to reach people to convince them that the people who are trying to tell folks the real stuff just don't have the megaphone to tell their story. And the reason for that, there's more money to be made in selling people unhealthy things and getting them sick than it is in trying to help folks to stay healthy. Unfortunately, that's where we are. Right. So there's a lot more complex issues than that, of course. I mean, we all know this. We have big mega corporations and mega whatever that has more voice and more influence,
Mm,
right? So the
mm.
key is this: if we can find a way, which is not probably not possible, to get rid of those outside noises and let people concentrate on what the real deal is, maybe we can be successful in doing that.
And
Um,
I guess maybe
so,
when we
so
were in
that's a
our
challenge.
silos, I guess maybe when we were in our silos, uh, make sure that these boys, almost like Black History, we don't expect people outside of us to teach it because it doesn't benefit them in their mind,
Absolutely,
to teach us who we are and what we've accomplished. And so in the same way that we don't expect them to teach that, I think the same mindset is that when we teach about healthy lifestyles and sound, better behaviors, that we can't expect people that benefit from poor behavior, and unhealthy lifestyles, we can't expect for them to change their messaging. And so when we're in our silos, whether it's our churches or organizations, that's the voice that has to be heard, that we have to be committed to. And so
absolutely,
not just, and so every area of our lives, we have to make sure that those messages are priority,
absolutely.
in our silos.
Yeah, absolutely. Any change that we want to make as a people, number one thing, we got to be alive first, right? We got to be alive and stay alive longer. And ultimately, this stuff we're talking about here, it's really to keep us alive. It's really to make us have longevity. And the longer we're alive, the more we can make an impact and make so many things, right? So this is not just about all these other things. It's about the future of us. The more we're alive, the more of us are around to really drive the things that we feel are important to us,
And
right?
I think
It's not
I
just
think the
about food.
quality and I think the quality of life is even more, like from my side as a pastor. It's my worst nightmare to live a long time but a poor quality of life. And so I think for us to really drive home that not only do we want to live a nice long life, but a nice quality, a high quality of life,
Absolutely.
And we see people. I mean, we see 100-year-old people that can still go and jump in a car and drive, or walk down the road, and in their right mind. And I think as we're messaging, really message, but that doesn't just happen. People did things to kind of help. Nothing's guaranteed, but people did things to help improve the quality of life as they age.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm just stuff that you're
And,
saying is kind
and
of just sticking in my head.
yeah, and just to add to that, Pastor, I know in the Blue Zone, which I have that book, there's a quote, and it says, "It's not just how long we live; it's also how well we live."
Hmm.
Absolutely.
That's the key. That's the key. How well we live, not how long. How well we live. It makes a difference. Dr. Dosha, you speak about heart disease, diabetes, stroke. Could you speak a little bit in terms of preventing prostate cancer? Could you speak a little bit on that to give us a little bit of overview?
Sure. So prostate cancer is kind of, one of those cancers that where we are now, there's still a lot of research that we're looking at about what really causes it. We know there's definitely some genetic factor to that. There's also some question
Mhm.
that is there a virus that causes it? We don't know that yet, but there's a lot of research going on with that. The only way to really not make prostate cancer a problematic issue for an individual is to get a PSA checked yearly. PSA. That's the basic thing. I mean, to at least get done. There are future studies being shown on what else we can do to reduce the incidence of prostate cancer. But most men who die from prostate cancer early is because, unfortunately, they weren't screened for it, just like most cancers as well, cancer of the cervix, etc. But screening is key. So if you go, you get your PSA checked, is elevated, then your doctor can then investigate and see, well, why is your PSA high? For some people, before they start having symptoms, or some men assume the symptoms of quote prostate cancer, sometimes the symptoms are somewhat vague, because the same thing happens if you have what something called benign prostatic hypertrophy, BPH. The same thing. You get up at night, you go use the bathroom, and you may not know there's something going on. But PSA will be a basic annual screening I would recommend for every man who's over the age of 50 to have done every year. PSA. Um, and that'll be a big factor. If the PSA is elevated, then the person can go to investigate further and see is there something going on. And if they also have symptoms of urination, what's called nocturia, where the person is getting up multiple times at night to urinate, they need to go get that checked out. And the checkout is always PSA is an easy test to do. Right?
I think you
So
really probably, I think you really probably got to have the. Sounds like you got to have a lot of discipline, a lot of commitment, to living a higher quality of life. And just in reading all this Blue Zone stuff, I had never heard of before you just said it. Um, but I think it's just a lot of self study, because there are things that I'm reading here that people that appeared that you would think was bad, but I just think it takes a lot of self study, because some of the stuff that they're saying in here, there's some myths on the other side that paints a different picture. So I think you just have to really be committed to the discipline of educating yourself, and then going with with what you receive, because I think there's going to be always some other teaching. I'm reading this right here. It says people living in blue zones eat primarily plant-based diet and choose a lot of beans such as fava beans, black beans, soy, lentil. On average, they eat a small portion of meat about 5 times a month. But
absolutely.
the kicker is it says usually pork. And I would have thought pork was the one that they didn't do. And so I think there's so much information out there that you just got to kind of be committed to trying to get the best information, and then just not jumping on every piece of information that you get,
Yeah.
because there's so many sources out there, and the internet is anybody can make a comment on the internet.
Sure. But so here's the deal, though. You know, as human beings, we've been around for forever. You know, what we're doing now is not anything new. I mean, so here's the deal: the type of meat you're eating is not the issue per se, right? It's how
Okay.
the meat is fixed,
The
and
process.
that main thing is processed meat. All right, the meat
I got
itself,
you.
and the meat itself isn't the issue. All right, processed meat,
I
pork meat is no different from any other meat if you're going to eat meat. I mean, it may be a little bit lesser fat in some parts of it, but the key is processed. So pork has a lot of
got you.
part of it that's processed, that's given it a bad name for a while. I mean, there's nothing really wrong. I mean, there's some issues with how the meats are processed. One of those is bacon, all right, which comes from pork. I mean, that's a major health wise that is not something that we recommend that anybody eat. Bacon, if you ask me, is like eating embalmed meat. You put it in your body and it just sits there. And then it just leads to blockage of all your blood vessels, right? But pork itself, goat, cow, if the person wants to eat meat, but when you look at the spectrum of what's better, plant-based foods are always best.
Got you.
Meat should be a garnish. It should be, part of your big plate when you eat. You've got a big steak, and then it should be just strips of meat. The meat cannot be your big spectrum where people have a plate of 3 slabs of ribs, you know, or chicken drumsticks. No,
So
right?
tell me what you think about this, Dr. Adosha. I had to do a funeral a couple years ago of a young lady. She was a student at one of our HBCUs, and what happened was the family shared to me that um, she decided not to include any type of meat or anything that came from an animal in her diet. And I guess with maybe her makeup or something, it was not good for her body. And so her doctor kind of warned her, this is not good for you. And but she was really committed to improving the quality, but
Mm-hmm.
apparently did. And then so she ended up dying because there was something that she was that her body needed, not necessarily, I don't know what, there was something that her body was needed, but the choice of diet that she chose didn't provide something that her body needed. And and so that ended up being fatal, and that's the second bout, she ended up dying, but trying to be healthier. And there's just some, seems like when I'm seeing the stuff that I'm reading, there's still certain things our body needs, but it doesn't need the type, like you're saying, the processing. And so that the way that meat is handled, the way that it's the processing, that's the problem. But there are things that God created that our body needs, but we have to know how to consume it in the most healthy way, it sounds like to me.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate. I'm not really sure what, it's kind of hard to speculate on what
Right,
happened. It's difficult because sometimes the stories may not be completely, I don't know. But typically, so cows themselves, right? Cows eat plant-based.
right.
Mm.
Um, you know, all the goats are plant-based as well. And
Mhm.
you really can get all the essential vitamins from plants. The one vitamin that most people who eat plant-based miss is vitamin B12, but you can get that from eating beans as well. So, I'm not really sure, but I mean, vitamin B12, people who eat plant-based, a lot of them also eat beans, and that's a major part of where you can get that vitamin from. So B12 deficiency could be an issue. But there are many cultures in the world who don't eat meat. You
Mhm.
know, for a lot of Hindus don't eat meat, and there's
Mhm.
billions of them, and they're all still alive.
Mhm. Mhm.
You
So,
know,
so, so, Dr. Dosha, what do you say to the person that says, well, I may kind of not eat those plant-based foods, but I go to the vitamin store and I get my vitamins that way? What's your response to that?
well, so the most animals have a lot of the plants too. I mean, have a lot of the vitamins that we get from plant-based foods, but it's just a matter of the toxins that this animal product causes to the body. It's the main issue. It's a toxin that you get from them. It's really the main issue. I'm not sure it's really because of nutritional deficiency, but rather the toxins that you get from eating a lot of the bad, quote, bad foods. Because again, there are many cultures in the world that just don't eat meat. You know, there's a lot of folks who don't eat meat. And, you know, so, yeah, vitamins are fine. Personally, I don't take vitamins. I just try to eat a natural diet. I mean, the diets have all the vitamins. I mean, the vitamins, again, is an industry that's selling you things. Yeah, if your nutrition is deficient, but if you're eating fruits, vegetables, some meat, fish, there's no reason that you should be vitamin deficient. Right? Vitamin deficiency is for folks who are not consuming a diet that's well-nourished diet. Right. So for a lot of vitamins people take is an excess. They take it and they urinate it out and it just passes through their body. A lot of the things are excess. A lot of folks sometimes take too much vitamins that they do not need. Right? Balanced diet is the key. Balanced diet has all the vitamins that you're gonna need. You know, fruits, vegetables, you mix it up, eat different things, and there should be no need for taking outside vitamins. You know, but everyone is different based on their choice and what they believe.
Hey, doctor, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, how are you?
This brother, this Byron. I got a question. I'm listening to this, and then I look at my grandmama, my great grandmama, and all these people. They have a little drink before this, or they ate all these different things. Would you say that they lived a long time, but would you say that it was a genetic something that maybe the generations after them start inheriting all these health issues and all these things, because it's the same people lived a long time, but now the life expectancy is getting short, and the food is, I guess you want to say, better or worse. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? They drank every day. They went to work in these fields every day. They lived to be 100 years old. But do you think their genetics passed down to, just say, my generation, that it took that long for that to catch up with what they were doing then? Because it just don't make sense, because you got people that I see that are leaving here. These are the healthy people. These are the people I look, and I know it looks deceiving, but it looked like people are living and eating reckless, living longer than the people that, and then you said something about, you know, big business, man, is doing this stuff. Because the way I look at it, I know this will throw everything, but I think what's for you is for you, because man, you go buying all this stuff, and next thing you know, you the first one in the emergency room. And then you got somebody don't even can't afford this healthy lifestyle of these fruits and vegetables and all this stuff, and just eating regular and living regular and living longer. Or maybe they got hidden agendas, you know what I'm saying? And with this, all these different things are coming up now. There ain't nothing new. But what happened, Doc? Why it took so long for the genetics to get into this generation so than it was, say, 100, just say, we'll go and just say 100 years ago?
All right, and that's a great question. So let me kind of explain the one basic thing that's happening, the change in people dying younger. So here's the deal, right? In the 1940s, even maybe 1950s, diabetes was mostly a white population disease. Okay? And then as things changed, lifestyle is an issue. Sedentary lifestyle. Sedentary lifestyle, all right? For a lot of us, you know, the lifestyle, like you mentioned earlier about, you know, the folks before would work in the fields. They were physically active. They really ate mostly fresh. I mean, people from 100 years ago, 80 years ago, they weren't eating a lot of the things that are eating now. There were no potato chips. There were none of all this stuff that were being sold, Coke, Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Gatorade. People didn't have any of that stuff, right? Speaking of alcohol by itself, there's some mixed evidence that alcohol in moderation can have some health benefits. I mean, alcohol helps to thin blood, if that's what you're referring to. They drank, but anybody who sat around and drank fifth of liquor, I don't care what it is, the person, you put yourself at risk for a lot of stuff. And again, living longer for longevity is not always the issue. I have patients who are 80 something years old but are demented, right? I mean, so you can live longer, but if you poison yourself with poisons, toxins, it's going to affect one part of your body or the other. All right, there's some effect. So the reason people lived longer and now is different. The genetic is not the issue. The issue really is lifestyle. Now in America, right? 60% of the population in America, white and black, Hispanic, 60% have either diabetes or pre-diabetes. And the reason people are just sitting around. We sit in our cars, come home, we sit on the couch, watch TV. There's so many sports on TV. The amount of exercise people are doing now than what people did before is entirely different. Entirely different. And that's also part of the problem. And the processed foods that have no nutrition is also part of the problem. Because we know there are cultures in America, people who are doing the way things are before, those folks are living longer and healthier. Cigarette smoke, alcohol that's laden in 40% proof, and then the advent of drug abuse, cocaine, amphetamines, all those things a lot of people are into. I mean, as a doctor, I see this all the time, right? There are folks people think or whatever, but they're out doing cocaine, right? Cocaine will destroy your brain. It will cause you to have a stroke, cause dementia. There's so many things out there that people are doing that leads to all these problems that you may not really know about. And people weren't doing these things 100 years ago.
Wow, that's some good stuff, Doc. That sedentary behavior with the processed food, that really connected some dots for me. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, that's the issue we're dealing with. I mean, all evidence shows that, processed foods and sedentary lifestyle, too much
And
TV.
so and so we do our children an injustice when we don't get them back to more of a lifestyle like we had, moving and doing things. We do them an injustice because many of the jobs that people do now, there's not a lot of activity.
Yeah.
And so I
Well,
think we do our kids an activity when we don't encourage them to walk and be active, and because they develop habits,
absolutely.
and then they're older now and they're not even in the habit of being outside or walking. I see I see what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So right now in America as well, right? A lot of young kids are obese, right? Childhood
Mm-hmm.
obesity is a big issue, right? So the video games, the Xbox, the Wii, the PlayStation, as fun as they are, parents need to set a limit. Again, lifestyle, just like anything else, there's got to be a limit. You do this for so many hours, you got to get out and do something else, get out and play. So parents let their kids, and that's a different issue. Everybody's got an iPad. I have kids come to the office, their parents, all they do is hand them an iPad and they're sitting there playing on this thing, looking at it, and there's no activity. There's nothing. And those are all issues that's going to be a problem for us in the future. And we're seeing that now with diabetes explosion. 60% of American adults right now in the USA either have diabetes or pre-diabetes, right? And that's a big money maker for corporations, right? Right now, all the corporations are doing their quarterly reports, and I watch all these drug companies do reports. They're betting when they do their report. What's our growth? Oh, our growth is Americans are going to have diabetes 10 years from now. So buy our stock, right? Every one of them. They are betting on this. People are investing billions of dollars in investment that all of us are going to live a unhealthy lifestyle. All right. It's like somebody investing in the police department and guaranteeing people are going to commit crime, build more jails. It's the same thing. I mean, it really is. Healthcare, there are folks out there who are betting on this thing that all of us are going to be, and it's just the nature of how it is. As Microsoft buys Activision, they're investing. They're buying it for $62 billion. They're investing that all of us are going to sit around playing video games. Nobody spends $62 billion for nothing.
So
I
that
just had a
60,
conversation. Go ahead.
so I just wanted to say that 60%, we're looking at 70 or 80% eventually. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Your
I
voice
said, so
is breaking up.
you're saying 60% of the Americans have diabetes. So we're looking at that percentage increasing rather than
Absolutely.
decreasing. Let's do something about it.
Yes, the prediction is 80% of adults,
Wow.
80% of adults by 2050. Right? So people are investing in this. They're investing money that by 2050, and that's only what, 20 something years from now, right? That by then diabetes will explode, right? Heart attack will explode. All these diseases will explode, and people profit from this. You know, people go to school to be cardiologists because they'll have a heart attack. There'll be stents put in. Do open heart surgery. Right? So, I mean, you can't blame them. It's not their fault. It's America. People are just exploiting what's out there. Right? So, but the key is early education, just like anything else. I mean, this is one part where we have a lot of input, and parents have a lot of say in this. Early education, like anything else that we as parents have to educate our next generation, is really about that the food they're advertising and selling us, it's not something that we should encourage them to eat. It's not something we as parents should go to Publix or whatever store and be the ones buying those things for them. They may have it at school because we don't have control over that, maybe. And that's really where we need to start. And of course, the parents ourselves also need to be educated about what it's good for them and for their children. And that's the trick of this whole thing, is how do we get the information out? How do we educate folks to make sure they know? Because as well, 60% of all diseases or even more is due to lifestyle issue. You go to the ER and you put a sign out there, you do a survey. Why are you here? All right. 60% of folks who walk through that door or more is because of lifestyle issue. So, and that's a difficult part. I mean, my job as a doctor is to take care of these things, but I always try to stress to my patients about prevention and how do we keep you away from being sicker and sicker and sicker. Because when you're sick, the patient doesn't benefit. Somebody else is benefiting.
Wow. Well, Dr. Dosha, you have really given us a lot to think about. You have really shared you've opened my eyes to several things. And we appreciate the information and the feedback. And I'd like to stay in contact with you and, have you come back again and again. I think that we need to have these reminders. We need to be updated and reminded in terms of how we're living our lives, and not only for ourselves, but also to educate the next generation.
Absolutely.
The next generation. So I thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule and, sharing the information with us this evening. And Pastor, I'm going to let you have the final words.
So I want to thank Dr. Adoshi for coming and speaking with us again. And I think we have a responsibility not to just receive the information, but implement the information and ensure that and so what I'll do is ask our health ministry that does the monthly health newsletter to make sure that we watch this video and that we highlight some things in there. but also, you know, the types of food that we act by example serve, and the things that we do by example. Your biggest testimony is your example. You can say one thing, but what people see you do is a whole different thing. And so I think we have a responsibility to implement what we learn, and really highlight this community garden that we have coming up. But add the education piece. It's not just to talk about all the different things that can be avoided, that we learned tonight, by simply, you know, growing our food and controlling. So, Dr. Dosha, we're extremely thankful for the information. Everybody that's on, please make sure you share the information, and let's not just talk about it. Let's do it. God bless you. Have a great day.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to come and talk and spread as much information about health that I can. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful,
Thank
wonderful,
you.
wonderful.
All right.
All
Have a
right,
good
you
night,
all
everybody.
take
Good
care.
job, Doc.
And remember
Okay.
that real talk tomorrow is in person. So look to see y'all in person tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Have a great one.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you. Have a good
Good
night.
night.
Right.
Good night.